The vast chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with the usual diplomatic chatter. Representatives from over 300 species occupied their designated pods, their voices creating a symphony of different languages and tones. The central holographic display showed the day's agenda floating in brilliant blue letters. High Commander Zextal, a towering figure with iridescent scales and 4 arms, stood at attention beside his console. His species, the Vertari, had served as the Council's military advisors for the past 3 centuries. The position came with both prestige and responsibility, and Zextal took his role very seriously. Honored representatives, the Council speaker's voice boomed through the chamber. We have received an unusual transmission. A previously unknown species requests membership in our interstellar alliance. Murmurs filled the chamber. New species weren't uncommon, but direct membership requests were rare. Most species were discovered and evaluated by Council exploration teams first. The speaker continued, "They call themselves humans and have sent a fleet to our borders as a show of good faith and capability." "Show us their fleet," commanded Zextal, his scaled fingers dancing across his console. The central hologram shifted, displaying a cluster of ships floating in space. The chamber fell silent for a moment before erupting in laughter. Even Zextal's professional demeanor cracked as he let out a deep, rumbling chuckle. 20 ships, he asked, disbelief evident in his voice. They seek membership with 20 ships. The Drachnid Empire's representative, a creature that looked like a cross between a dragon and an insect, raised his crystalline staff. "Esteemed Council, surely we need not waste time on this matter. Their entire fleet is smaller than a standard trading convoy. They clearly lack the technological advancement to contribute meaningfully to our alliance." More agreements echoed through the chamber. The ships were indeed small, each no larger than a standard cargo hauler. Compared to the massive dreadnoughts of the Drachnid Empire or the city-sized vessels of the Vertari, they looked like toys. But in her corner of the chamber, Ambassador Lyra watched with interest. Unlike her physical counterparts, her energy-based form allowed her to perceive things others might miss. Something about the energy signatures of those ships seemed different. "I suggest we investigate further." Lyra spoke, her voice carrying a melodic quality that instantly commanded attention. "Size isn't everything, after all. Remember the Mindari." The chamber grew quiet. The Mindari were a species that had nearly conquered half the galaxy, with ships the size of shuttles, using technology so advanced it seemed like magic. They had vanished mysteriously millennia ago, but the lesson remained. "Ambassador Lyra raises a fair point," the speaker acknowledged. "High Commander Zextal, what do our scans reveal about these vessels?" Zextal studied his readings with renewed seriousness. "The energy outputs are unusual. Their power cores are remarkably small, yet they're generating significant energy. The hull composition is unlike anything in our database. And," he paused, double-checking his readings, "they appear to be crewed by only 12 individuals each." 12. The Drachnid representative scoffed. "Impossible. A ship of that size requires at least 100 crew members to function properly." "Yet our scans are clear," Zextal replied, his professional interest now piqued. "Perhaps there is more to these humans than we initially assumed." The speaker raised all 4 hands for silence. "We shall follow first contact protocols. Send a diplomatic vessel to greet them properly. If nothing else, their unusual approach to shipbuilding warrants investigation." As the Council moved on to other matters, Ambassador Lyra's energy form flickered with amusement. She had lived long enough to know that the greatest surprises often came in the smallest packages. These humans, whoever they were, had already managed to do something remarkable. They had made the Galactic Council curious. The Council's diplomatic vessel, the Starseeker, approached the human fleet with measured caution. Despite its peaceful mission, Captain Myrtal kept his shields raised. Being cautious had kept him alive for over 2 centuries of diplomatic service. Through the main viewport, he studied the human ships more carefully. Their design was unlike anything he'd seen before. Most species built their ships with obvious weapon ports and engine arrays, but these vessels were smooth, almost organic in appearance. They reminded him of the water creatures from his homeworld. "Captain," his sensor officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from their lidship." "Put it through," Nurtal ordered, straightening his ceremonial robes. The holographic display flickered to life, and for the first time, the council delegation saw a human. The creature was bictal, with pinkish-brown skin and fur only on top of its head. It wore a crisp white uniform adorned with gold markings. "Greetings, Starseeker. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Ship Endeavor. Welcome to our fleet." Her translator conveyed the words perfectly, but something about her smile made Nurtal uncomfortable. Most species didn't show their teeth unless they were threatening to eat something. "Greetings, Captain Chen. I am Captain Nurtal, representing the Galactic Council." He performed the traditional greeting gesture with all 6 of his arms. "We are here to evaluate your application for membership." "We appreciate the prompt response," Sarah replied. "Would you like to dock with our vessel for a tour?" Nurtal's diplomatic team exchanged glances. It was unusual for a species to be so forward. "That would be acceptable," he said carefully. As they docked, Nurtal's security chief, Vex, reviewed the scans again. "Captain, these readings make no sense. Their ship should need at least 10 times the crew they have. How are they managing the central functions?" "Perhaps we'll find out," Nurtal replied as they approached the airlock. The human ship's interior was just as surprising as its exterior. The corridors were narrow by council standards, but every space seemed to serve multiple purposes. What looked like a simple wall panel could transform into a repair station. Ceiling fixtures doubled as emergency medical equipment. "This is our bridge," Captain Chen said, leading them into a compact command center. Only 3 humans were present, each attending to multiple holographic displays. Only 3 bridge crew. Vex couldn't contain his surprise. "How do you manage navigation, weapons, communications, and system monitoring?" A young human turned from her station, her fingers dancing through the air as she manipulated multiple holographic interfaces simultaneously. "Multitasking," she said with another one of those tooth-bearing smiles. "Why use 10 people when 1 person can do the job?" Nurtal noticed something else odd. "Your crew seems very young." "I'm 34, Captain Chen said, one of our more experienced captains. The diplomatic team stared in shock. Most council species lived for centuries. A 34-year-old would be considered barely more than a child. "Perhaps you'd like to see our engine room," Chen suggested, either not noticing or politely ignoring their reaction. The engine room proved even more baffling. Instead of the massive power cores most ships used, the humans had something smaller than a personal transport pod. Yet, according to their instruments, it was putting out enough power to run a ship 10 times this size. "It's a matter/antimatter reactor of our own design," the engineer explained proudly. "Very efficient." As they concluded the tour, Nurtal found himself deeply troubled. Everything about these humans defied conventional wisdom. They were young, few in number, and seemingly unconcerned about the normal way of doing things. Yet their technology, while different, was undeniably advanced. Back on the Starseeker, Vex summed up what everyone was thinking. "They're either brilliant or insane, possibly both." Nurtal began composing his report to the council. One thing was certain. These humans were going to change everything. The Galactic Council's military testing grounds stretched across an entire solar system. Massive holographic markers floated in space, creating an obstacle course that had tested thousands of species over the centuries. High Commander Zextal watched from the observation station as the human ships took their positions. "The course is designed to test speed, maneuverability, and combat readiness," he explained to the gathered council representatives. "No fleet has ever achieved a perfect score." Ambassador Lyra's energy form pulsed with interest. "And what do you expect from our human friends? Given their small size, they might manage the speed portions well enough," Zextal admitted. But the combat scenarios will prove impossible for such tiny vessels. Captain Chen's voice came through the communication system. Endeavour fleet ready to begin testing. You may proceed when ready, Zextal announced, settling back to watch what he assumed would be a brief and unremarkable demonstration. The first test was simple enough. A series of rapid direction changes through marked points in space. The human ships moved in perfect formation, their engines leaving brief blue trails in the void. But as they approached the first turning point, something impossible happened. The ships didn't turn. They pivoted. That's not possible, Vex muttered from his security station. Ships that size can't change direction that quickly. The crew would be turned to paste. But the humans weren't done surprising them. As the ships entered the combat portion of the course, they did something that made several council members gasp. The vessels split apart, each section becoming a smaller independent ship while maintaining perfect formation. Modular design. Zextal leaned forward, his scales rippling with excitement. No, look at the energy readings. Each section has its own power core. The target drones launched their simulated attacks. In normal tests, ships would perform evasive maneuvers while returning fire. The humans took a different approach. Their ships wove through the incoming fire in patterns that seemed to defy physics, getting so close to the drones that several council members covered their eyes, expecting collisions. But there were no collisions, just precision. Perfect, impossible precision. How are they doing this? A Drachnid observer demanded. No inertial dampeners are that good. Ambassador Lyra's energy form brightened. That's because they're not using standard inertial dampeners. Look at the energy patterns around their hulls. They're manipulating gravity itself. The demonstration continued for another hour, with each test revealing new surprises. The human ships could merge back together, split apart, rotate on any axis instantly, and accelerate or decelerate without any apparent concern for the laws of physics. When the final scores were calculated, even Zextal had trouble keeping his professional composure. The humans hadn't just passed the test. They had scored higher than any fleet in Council history. Captain Chen's image appeared on the main screen. She wasn't even breathing hard. Is there anything else you'd like us to demonstrate? I believe we have seen enough, Zextal managed to say. Though I have many questions about your technology. Our ships use a combination of technologies we developed out of necessity, Chen explained. Earth's gravity is higher than most habitable worlds, so we had to master gravity manipulation early in our space development. The modular design came from our need to make the most of limited resources. As the council members filed out of the observation room, still discussing what they had witnessed, Ambassador Lyra approached Zextal. Still think they're not worth our time? She asked, her energy form flickering with amusement. Zextal watched the human ships through the viewport, their hulls gleaming in the starlight. I think, he said slowly, that we're looking at the future of space travel. And it's much smaller than we expected. In her quarters that evening, Captain Chen sent a brief message back to Earth. Phase 1 complete. They're starting to understand. The emergency alert pierced through the council session like a knife. Red warning lights pulsed across the chamber as a holographic display materialized in the center of the room. Drachnid warships detected near the Epsilon mining colony. The automated system announced. 15 vessels of Dreadnought class. They have opened fire on civilian installations. High Commander Zextal immediately took charge. Where is the nearest response fleet? 3 days at maximum speed, his aide reported grimly. The colony's defenses won't last an hour. The Drachnid representative was conspicuously absent from his pod, and the implications weren't lost on anyone. This wasn't a random attack. It was a calculated move while the Council was distracted with the human application. 2,000 civilians on that colony. Ambassador Lyra's energy form flickered with distress. We can't just. This is Captain Chen of the Earth ship Endeavour. A familiar voice cut through the chaos. We're picking up the distress signal. Our fleet is approximately 30 minutes from the colony's position. The chamber fell silent. 20 small ships against 15 Drachnid dreadnoughts. It would be suicide. Captain Chen. Zextal spoke carefully. While we appreciate your offer, the Drachnid ships are each roughly the size of a small moon. They carry enough firepower to destroy our fleet. Yes, we've analyzed their capabilities. Chen's voice remained steady. Request permission to assist the colony. The council speaker looked troubled. Captain, we cannot ask your species to sacrifice. You're not asking. We're offering. But we need clearance to engage, or this will be considered an unauthorized military action. Sextal studied the tactical display. The human ships were indeed the only help within range, but sending them in would be sending them to their deaths. Yet, after their demonstration yesterday, permission granted, he said suddenly, surprising even himself. But Captain Chen, please remember, you don't need to defeat them. Just delay them until reinforcements arrive. They could hear the smile in Chen's voice. Acknowledged, Commander. Endeavor fleet moving to engage. The council chamber's main display shifted to show the tactical situation. The Drachnid fleet had formed a standard attack pattern, their massive ships moving with ponderous inevitability toward the colony. The human vessels appeared as tiny dots in comparison. The Drachnid commander's transmission boomed through the chamber. This is Command Ship Eternal Night. Small fleet, you have 5 minutes to retreat before we consider you hostile, and respond accordingly. This is Captain Chen. We're here to evacuate civilians. Stand down, or we will be forced to defend ourselves. Laughter echoed through the transmission. You? Defend. With those tiny. The transmission cut off as the human fleet accelerated to attack speed. They're not seriously going to, someone in the chamber whispered. But they were. The human ships arrowed straight toward the Drachnid fleet at speeds that made several council members gasp. The Drachnids opened fire, their massive energy weapons lighting up space, and hitting nothing but void. The human ships moved like dancers, each blast missing by mere meters. It wasn't random evasion. They were predicting the shots, moving before the Drachnids even fired. Impossible, a council member muttered. Their crews should be unconscious from those maneuvers. But in her corner, Ambassador Lyra watched with growing understanding. Look at their energy signatures, she said softly. They're not just avoiding the shots. They're using the enemy's weapon energy to boost their own shields. The chamber watched in stunned silence as 20 tiny ships took on a fleet of dreadnoughts. And for the first time, several council members began to wonder if they had badly underestimated humanity's capabilities. On the Endeavor's bridge, Captain Chen smiled grimly. All ships, execute Attack Pattern Delta. Let's show them why size isn't everything. Attack Pattern Delta turned out to be unlike anything the Council had ever seen in centuries of space warfare. The human ships split apart into their smaller components, creating a swarm of 40 vessels that danced through space like a school of fish. By the ancient stars, Sextal breathed, watching the tactical display. Look at their coordination. The Drachnid dreadnoughts fired their main weapons again and again, but hitting the human ships was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. Each blast of energy meant for destruction instead seemed to make the human shields glow brighter. Inside the Endeavor, Captain Chen's voice remained steady. Beta Squad, draw their fire. Gamma Squad, target their sensor arrays. Alpha Squad, with me. We're going for their flagship's engines. The council chamber watched in amazement as the human fleet executed these commands with perfect precision. Years of playing video games and sports had given human crews an edge no one had expected, the ability to think and move in 3 dimensions without hesitation. Their reaction times are impossible, a military analyst muttered, reviewing the data. They're responding to attacks before the enemy weapons even finish charging. On the main display, 3 Drachnid ships suddenly found themselves completely blind as precise strikes disabled their sensor arrays. The massive vessels began firing wildly into space, trying to hit targets they could no longer track. Look at their targeting. Ambassador Lyra observed. The humans aren't trying to destroy the ships. They're surgically disabling them. She was right. Instead of attacking the Drachnid vessel's vulnerable spots, the human ships were methodically removing their ability to fight. A disabled engine here, a weapons system there, like a doctor performing surgery rather than a warrior dealing death. The Drachnid commander's voice boomed through the chamber again, this time with noticeable panic. What sorcery is this? How are they predicting our attack patterns? No sorcery. Chen replied calmly as her ship dove through another barrage of fire. Just lots of practice playing Asteroid Defender VI back home. Several council members looked confused at this reference, but there was no time to ask questions. The battle had reached its turning point. The human ships suddenly converged on the Drachnid flagship, moving in a spiral pattern that seemed to defy the laws of physics. As they spun closer, their energy signatures began to sync up, creating a cascading effect that the Council's scientists would study for years to come. All ships, execute Omega Maneuver, Chen commanded. The spiral collapsed inward, each human ship adding its shield energy to a growing sphere of power. When they released it, the pulse knocked out every system on the Drachnid flagship except life support. The remaining Drachnid ships, seeing their command vessel helpless in space, began to retreat. Their mighty dreadnoughts, each capable of destroying a small moon, fled from ships they had mocked just hours before. In the council chamber, silence reigned. The tactical display showed the impossible truth. 20 human ships had just defeated 15 Drachnid dreadnoughts without losing a single vessel or crew member. Captain Chen, Zextal finally managed to say, "I believe you've made your point about the capabilities of your fleet." "Thank you, Commander," Chen replied. "But if you'll excuse us, we have civilians to evacuate and damaged colonial infrastructure to repair." As the human ships began their rescue operations with the same efficiency they'd shown in combat, Ambassador Lyra turned to the council speaker. "I believe," she said with a flicker of amusement in her energy field, "we should fast-track their membership application before someone else realizes what humanity could teach them about building ships." Looking at the disabled Drachnid vessels floating helplessly in space, no one disagreed with her assessment. The emergency council session that followed the battle was unlike any in recent memory. Representatives from every major species crowded the chamber, all talking at once about what they had witnessed. The Drachnid Empire's pods stood conspicuously empty, their representatives recalled home in disgrace. High Commander Zextal stood at the central podium, presenting his analysis of the human fleet's performance. Behind him, holographic displays showed detailed breakdowns of the battle. "The humans didn't just defeat the Drachnid fleet," he explained, his scales shimmering with excitement. "They've completely changed our understanding of space combat. Every assumption we had about ship design, crew requirements, and battle tactics needs to be reconsidered." The displays shifted to show the internal layout of a human vessel. Their ships aren't small because they lack technology. They're small because that's the most efficient design. While we've been building bigger ships to house more crew and systems, they've been perfecting ways to do more with less. Ambassador Lyra's energy form pulsed in agreement. Their approach to gravity manipulation alone is revolutionary. Instead of fighting inertia, they've found a way to simply ignore it. In the medical section of the chamber, cynobiologists shared their findings about the human crews. "Their neural response times during combat were off our charts," one reported. "What we thought was impossible maneuvering was actually perfect prediction and reaction. They've turned space combat into something like a dance." The military representatives were particularly interested in the battle footage. "Look here," a Verteri admiral pointed out. "They didn't just avoid the Drachnid weapons, they used the enemy's energy against them. The more firepower the Drachnids deployed, the stronger the human shields became." The council speaker raised all four hands for silence. "We have a more immediate concern. The Drachnid Empire has violated our laws by attacking a civilian colony. Their actions demand a response." "They've already received quite a response," someone muttered, causing scattered laughter throughout the chamber. Nevertheless, the speaker continued, formal sanctions must be applied. Their leadership claims they were conducting military exercises and accidentally strayed into colonial space. Exercises, with weapons fully charged. Zextal scoffed. They saw an opportunity to expand their territory, while we were distracted with the human application. They simply didn't expect those tiny ships to stop them. At that moment, Captain Chen's image appeared on the main display. She had been invited to speak, but chose to remain with her fleet, helping repair the colony's infrastructure. Honorable Council, she began, we appreciate your concern about the Drachnid attack. However, we believe this incident presents an opportunity for positive change. The chamber grew quiet, listening intently. Instead of purely punitive sanctions, we propose a cultural exchange program. Let Drachnid engineers and scientists work with human teams. Let them learn why smaller can be better, why efficiency trumps brute force. Help them grow beyond their current mindset. The council members exchanged surprised looks. Most species would be demanding revenge, not offering education. A most unusual suggestion, the speaker said carefully. We didn't come to your council to make enemies, Chen replied with a slight smile. We came to share knowledge, to learn and teach, even from this incident. As the council debated this proposal, Ambassador Lyra noticed something remarkable. The same representatives who had laughed at the human fleet days ago were now eagerly discussing ways to learn from humanity's approach to technology and warfare. The tiny fleet had done more than win a battle. It had changed the way an entire galaxy thought about power, efficiency, and progress. And this was only the beginning. 1 month after the battle at Epsilon Colony, the Galactic Council's main chamber had been transformed. Where once the human delegation had stood in a small observer's pod, they now occupied one of the primary seats. Captain Chen sat beside High Commander Zextal, both of them reviewing reports on their data screens. The Drachnid response to our exchange program has been surprising, Chen said, scrolling through the latest numbers. Over 300 of their young engineers have already applied. Zextal nodded, his scales reflecting the soft light of the chamber. Nothing motivates change quite like defeat, but I'm more interested in these design modifications your teams have proposed for our defensive fleet. The main holographic display showed a new class of ship, a fusion of human efficiency and council technology. It was smaller than traditional council vessels, but larger than human ships, incorporating the best aspects of both designs. Ambassador Lyra's energy form drifted over to join their discussion. The Council's Defense Committee meeting starts in 10 minutes. Are you both ready to present the joint patrol proposal? The proposal in question would revolutionize how the Council protected its space. Instead of relying on massive patrol fleets that took days to respond to emergencies, they would deploy smaller, faster response units based on human designs. Nervous, Captain? Zextal asked, noticing Chen adjusting her uniform. She smiled. The last time I was this nervous, we were facing down 15 dreadnoughts. At least then I knew what to expect. The chamber filled quickly as representatives arrived for the Defense Committee session. The Drachnid pods, once empty in shame, now held new representatives who watched the proceedings with keen interest rather than their former arrogance. The council speaker called the session to order. Today marks a historic occasion. For the first time, we will hear a joint proposal from our human allies and our traditional defense forces. Chen and Zextal took the podium together. Behind them, the display showed simulation after simulation of the new patrol system in action. Response times dropped from days to hours. Efficiency rates doubled, then tripled. The age of building bigger ships is over, Zextal announced. The humans have shown us a better way, not through size or power, but through innovation and efficiency. Chen stepped forward. But we've learned from you as well. Your centuries of experience, your advanced materials, your deep understanding of galactic politics. These are all vital. Together, we can create something greater than either of us could achieve alone. The chamber erupted in applause when they finished their presentation. The vote that followed was unanimous, a rarity in council history. The galaxy's defense forces would be transformed. Later, in a quiet corner of the chamber, Ambassador Lyra found Chen staring out at the stars. "Credit for your thoughts, Captain," the energy being asked. "Just thinking about that first day," Chen replied. "When they all laughed at our tiny fleet, it seems so long ago now." "Size isn't everything." Lyra's form pulsed with amusement. "Though I must admit, none of us expected you to prove it quite so dramatically." Chen laughed. "Would you believe that back on Earth, we were worried about making a good first impression? We nearly sent our bigger ships." "The universe has a sense of humor," Lyra observed. The fleet they mocked became the fleet that changed everything. As they watched, a patrol of new hybrid ships passed by the council station, sleek, efficient vessels that represented the future. They were smaller than the old dreadnoughts, but moved with a grace that made the older ships look clumsy in comparison. The term tiny fleet was still used in galactic circles, but now it was spoken with respect, even admiration. It had become a reminder that true strength wasn't about size or power. It was about innovation, efficiency, and the courage to do things differently. Humanity had arrived in the galactic community not with a roar, but with a whisper that changed everything.